So I'm Rebecca Husted. I live in Macon, Georgia. I teach technical large animal emergency rescue to veterinarians and firefighters and basically anybody that'll listen. And I've been doing that for 30 years now, which is sort of scary that it's been that long, which might be related to this discussion. And I also work with animal control officers looking at large animal cruelty investigations, which is also relevant to some of the things in this presentation. So
tonight we're going to talk about planning end of life. And, you know, Rebecca and I have been chit-chatting here because she's been, do you mind if I mention?
No, that's fine with me.
She's been dealing with someone's life who ended recently, and that she was executor and power of attorney. And so it's very relevant. You know, this conversation isn't just about our horses. And I think that that's something that's important for you to realize, that we really need to plan for our animals, but we also need to plan for ourselves. And quite frankly, it's not for us, it's the ones we leave behind.
Yep.
And, you know, it's a stressful time no matter what. It's more stressful when things haven't been prepared for. And I think that that's the message here is that, you know, it's not easy to, I'm going to stop your large screen. It's not easy to be an adult. Believe me, it is not. You know, I mean, you can't avoid it. You hit a certain age and you're an adult. And so you're stuck with it. It's true, right? But you can do that in a way that is healthy. I'm going to say healthy. And here, let me just bring up Dr. Feldenkrais, because I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, as you know, and he wrote a book called Body and Mature Behavior. I know, like, who writes these things and who can read them? His writings were so thick and really hard to read. But basically what he was talking about is that when in order to mature, we have to go back and look at the patterns that we developed in order to survive. And as babies, it doesn't matter how good your family life was. You figured out a mechanism to survive and to get your needs met. In that process, it can be a habit that you carry through your entire life until and unless you take a moment to consciously acknowledge the patterns you've developed and address them and decide, is this really working for me? Yep. And I think when it comes to topics like this, Rebecca, what we want to do is stick our head in the sand to avoid, to distract, to do other things and not look at this. But we have to look at that habit from the perspective of, is that really serving me? Yep. Right? Is this a habit I developed and I just keep recreating it, but it's really not serving and it's actually creating more stress?
And what we're going to talk about tonight is giving you some of the tools to evaluate those kinds of habits and those thought processes and the way you might have done it. And I'm going to ask you guys to make some tough conversations with yourself, to ask you some questions that may be looking inside yourself to say, hey, how do I evaluate these things? And how much has that changed over my lifetime? You know, when I was young, do anything to save my horse. As I've gotten older and you see the things you see, you go, wait a minute, there's a limit to this. You know, I've seen people put themselves in financial ruin over horses. I've seen that people do things that wandered into cruelty, all those kinds of things. And so there you go.
Right. I call it benign. It's more like ignorant. You're not doing it on purpose. You're doing it because you're avoiding something that.
And we're going to talk about that avoiding too, because I think we've finally gotten down to what's going on with the avoiding part. So,
great. Okay.
I'm not a psychologist, guys. I'm a Ph.D. in animal physiology. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to share some things with you guys. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
But you're going to hit share screen and then we're going to see it. So we're going to let Rebecca take it away here. And as always, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that. And hi, Gail from California. It was great I saw Gail out in California when I was at the Western States Horse Expo. Yay. It was really fun. Yeah. So you're doing your screen share thing again?
Yeah, I'm trying.
It worked just fine before.
Of course it did. Can you see anything?
Not yet.
Oh my
You went up
goodness.
to the little button that says turn screen share on, yeah?
Yeah, I did that.
And then you picked the screen you wanted to share, yeah?
Yeah. Window. There we go. All right. I was getting nervous.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
So there we go. So we're going to talk about this from, I take it from which last chapter are you going to write? And when it comes down to end of life planning, it's not just, the horse, it's not just you, and it's also your veterinarian. So we're going to talk about those kind of things this evening. So I thought it was funny. I had to put this on the first thing for you, Wendy. The gender reveals, the wedding, the retirement. I see these things on Facebook and I'm like, oh my God, these people spend so much time, effort, and all those things. But then, our heart horse, our horse that we love so much and all those kind of things, we stick our head in the sand and we wait till the last day. And then, our last view of our horse is awful. It's in the middle of the night. It's in the rain. It's in the mud. It's all those kind of things. And, as part of some of the things that I do with large animal rescue, I see all those things. And of course, people PM them to me and send them to me, or they're sad and they call me and they want me to, tell them that they did the right thing or whatever they want. And, and I'm sitting there thinking, you had the horse's entire life to try to get it right. And you didn't do that. And so let's try to get it right a little bit more often. That's really what it comes down to. And as you pointed out, the adulting thing is painful. There's some graphic ideas in here. There's a lot of tough photos and videos. There's not too much gory stuff per se, but some of it's sort of tough to look at and think about. So, full disclosure, there may be some things in here that make you guys a little bit painful. Honestly, when you're talking about end of life planning, I think it should be a little bit painful because we should put enough effort into it that we actually get emotionally involved. So, the thing that we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to try to formulate a plan. We're going to give you some of the tools that you can do for decision making. And sometimes that's the biggest problem, is making the decision, and then discussing some quality of life assessments for those of you that may have older horses, or, all my horses are 2003 babies, and I've got one 2000 baby. So all of them are at least 22, and some of them are older than that. And so my whole herd is moving in that direction, and I've got to think about those kinds of things. I had to put one horse down. This is Tornado in the picture. Had to put him down last year. And, trying to figure out how to do those things and letting you guys learn from some of the things that I've done over my life. I've had horses my whole life. I've had to euthanize horses over my whole life. I've watched many of my friends have to do it. And I'm just trying to make you guys a little bit better, learning from some of the things that I've had to do. So I asked, which last chapter are you going to write? Because you're writing the horse can't write this chapter unless he drops dead. And if he drops dead, then it's an unexpected loss to you. You're upset, but the horse is dead, right? That doesn't happen very often. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but it doesn't happen very often. Usually, we're in the situation of an emergency. It's painful. You have an injury. The animal's suffering for some reason, and it's an emergency situation, which you have to involve a vet. Sometimes it's a chronic situation. The animal's no longer ability to cope with living. You're having to do all the extra things to try to keep him alive. He doesn't have his teeth anymore, so you've got to feed him. You've got to do all those kinds of things. I've got a girlfriend of mine. Her horse was 36, and her mama was feeding it 6 times a day. And that was great because her mom lived at home and was willing to do those kind of things. But how many of those of us that work can feed a horse 6 times a day? And so, some of those kind of things go along with aging. And sometimes it's not aging, as Wendy has talked about in many of her seminars. Animals age at different rates, just like we do. And then, of course, pain and mobility issues that may be associated with aging, but may be associated with genetic things, et cetera. I have she's 22 now, quarter horse that I didn't think she would make it past 10 because of her horrific conformation. I've never ridden her because of it, but she was involved with doing our large animal rescue stuff from the beginning. And she's wonderful. Her name is Ariel. And over the years, between my vet and a really good farrier, we have managed to keep her out of pain and not having the mobility issues. But we had to do some tough things. We've had to move her into a situation where she's a buddy horse to an older horse that isn't going to beat up on her and do all the things that younger crazy horses might do. So that means she's not at my home. I had to find a better home for her. She's close to my house. I can go see her, but, I had to make some changes. And then, of course, talking about you as a person, and you may get ill, you may die, God forbid you die in a car wreck, those kinds of things. And as we get older, our inability to care properly for horses. Now, that may not be true for everyone, but some people, I ended up with a horse that a lady that was 85 and had 30 horses.
Oh,
And,
geez.
yeah. So she was obviously unable to do that. So we're going to talk about some of those things. So the biggest question that everyone needs to ask themselves is, what is your values? Are you a quality of life person, or are you quantity of life? Because humans in general, for the last, 40,000 years or so since we came out of the caves, we have valued quantity of life. We go, oh, wow. I'm sitting here this evening next to someone who is 83 years old. And guess what? She still drives. She is in a sculling class up here on the ocean. She just got back from Colorado going to a conference. She is fully involved in life. She does not like any other 83-year-old you ever met. But used to be, everybody said, oh, wow, I want to make it to 105. I want to make it to, yeah, well, over my life, I've decided that quality of life is more important. So you have to ask yourself that first. And Sharon is the one that actually edited this book that we recently got out, Fraser's The Behavior and Welfare of the Horse. So yeah. I'm glad to have her here tonight. So some of the other tools that we can look at is quality of life assessments. And those of you that are on, the folks that are on this are probably very aware of the changes in welfare and behavior understanding over just the last 20 years. This is a good graphic that we got from down in Australia. It's based on a lot of the work from Paul McGreevy and Andrew McLean and those kind of folks. But Dr. Sue Dyson has been working on the ridden horse pain theorem. And yes, I am going to hook you up, but she's been in Namibia. So we're going to get you up on a webinar with her. But, are we smart enough to know how smart animals are? Do we really understand their welfare? All those things are just part of what we're doing the last 10 years is looking at, how good does the horse feel? How bad does the horse feel? What does it mean when he's in a negative valence or a positive valence? We throw those words around. I love Christina Wilkins. She's been working really hard on trying to get people to think about this, the valences, the 5 domains, all these kinds of things. But we have to also look at it over time. How often does our horse feel good? How often does our horse feel bad? There's some horses that, he's got an injury right now and he's very depressed and having to get treatments and all those things, and he feels bad for a week. Does that mean we need to put him down? Probably not, as long as he's under veterinary care and he's getting all the other things, right? But if he starts getting into this where he's in that 50% of the time, at what point do we start saying, hey, maybe we need to make a hard decision? So all those folks have been working on the 5 domains. I'm sure that many of you are very aware of this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You can always go to, if you look up the 5 domains for horse welfare assessment, you can find this. But the point of this is, how often does your horse spend in a positive state? And how often does your horse spend in a negative state? And do you actually know what you're looking at? Do you know how to evaluate pain? Do you know how to understand whether or not that horse is anxious, insecure, or if he truly is, happy and healthy and those kind of things? It turns out that more and more research is showing. I just got back from the International Society for Equestrian Science last week in Colorado, and it turns out that there's a lot of people that are horse people that think their horse is all these great things, and it turns out that they're not. And when you start looking at the hormones and those kind of things, it's starting to tell a different story than what horse people say, right? So educate yourself. That's not my bailiwick, so I'm just involving and giving you guys the tools. You should look at these tools. And they actually put this together on the Horses and People website. There is the website, How to Make Horse Euthanasia Decisions, and using this welfare checklist. How often is your horse in, a good state versus a bad state? It turns out there's nothing universal. Dr. Moore scholar. He just got a big award, has been working with the McGreevy's and the McLeans of the world and Christina Wilkins for many years, trying to get this information out there. But there's a recent paper by Long and all his folks and looking at, trying to inform the decisions that horse people are making, but veterinarians are making, because it's even hard on veterinarians.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we're going to get to, is how do we make life better for ourselves too? So all that to say, take all that science and put it down to one slide. And it really comes down to quality of life is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. It goes way beyond when people say, well, he's out there in the back pasture and he's eating and drinking and he's walking around. And I'm like, okay, but is he depressed in between times? Is he playing? Is he out there with his buddies? Or is he starting to just, it's the old, with people, they used to say it's a wallflower. Well, the reason that old people were wallflowers is because they couldn't see, they couldn't hear. And if you can't see or hear, you really can't be part of human social things, right? So they were a wallflower and they sat on the wall and weren't, I guess they were sort of bitchy, but of course they were. They didn't know what was going on around them. So it happens to horses too. So how often are these animals choosing to interact with others? Do they get friends, freedom, and forage, or are they not? And do they have freedom from the pain and injury and disease? Way too many horses we see, it's just an old horse. And I go, old horses deserve to be healthy too. That it's not right to say, oh, he's old, so we just put him out in the back pasture and eventually.
Well, and horses are living so much longer.
Exactly.
Like, it's crazy. Like when I was a kid, 19, the horse was ancient and about to die. And now at 36, he's still going,
Yep. And there's people that have been doing these century rides. It's the total, if you think about it, the horse has to be at least 30 and you've got to be 70 to get a century ride, right?
Right.
I mean, there you go. So sort of crazy. So a lot of that comes down to, how is your horse doing? This is a 22-year-old. This is a 26-year-old. How are they doing when they're given the opportunity to express their normal behaviors and do all the things that horses do? And, obviously they're running and playing and doing all the kinds of things. So that's a really good way to welfare assess what your animals are actually doing versus, if they don't do those kinds of things and they're 26 years old, you probably should have a vet involved and look at those kind of things, right? Anyway, so take a look at quality of life assessments. And the thing is, we have to do this over time. It is about the horse's sense of well-being and welfare. It's not yours. It's theirs. And so how do we measure that? That's really hard when they don't speak English or any other human language that we think of. So we have to get better at looking at their quality of life and their sense of well-being, how we do those kind of things. And it really comes to over time. So I'm going to use a personal example. That's me in my shorts when I was 16. That's Bobar. And he was 2.5 years old. Wendy, I don't know what my parents were thinking. Oh my God, I look at this picture and I'm like, look at the bit, look at the stupidity. He's 2.5. Why was I riding him at 2.5? But my parents didn't know.
Well, because back then you're that long in the tooth. Back then, that's what people did in Georgia.
That's right. And better than that, the horse was going to die when he's 19. And when he was 15, he was going to be considered old. So they said, oh, well, we'll start riding him at 2.5 or 3, right? Yeah. Well, there he is at 30. He made it to 36. So apparently I didn't kill him, all the things that we did when we were kids riding the horse, right? There's my niece at 16 holding the same horse. And, that's sort of interesting how much his pattern changed over the years, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, what is his body look like? How does his muscling look like? All those things at 30. And that needs to be on a regular basis. You have to look at those pictures and say, hey, what did he look like, right? So since we generally think of making these decisions for older horses, that's not always true. Sometimes it's different, but we're going to talk about geriatric horses. I'm going to put a big pin in y'all's balloon if you think that horses die natural, quiet deaths. They just don't. And Miller and his folks did some really good work in the Veterinary Pathology Journal a few years ago and said, most of these horses between 15 and 35, they were having gastrointestinal disease, the strangulation, the impactions, the ruptures, colics, and then, of course, all the other things that come with that, the lameness, the laminitis, all those kinds of things. But colic is the big one, right? So taking care of their gastrointestinal system is part of it. And they don't ever die of colic in a nice, quiet death unless their gut splits. And that's awful too. So we don't want that to happen. And so what we talk about is, it needs to be, I don't care if it's a year, a month, a day too early. People say, oh, well, he could have gone another week. And I go, was it a beautiful day? Yep. Did you put him down and it was nice and quiet? Yep. Was he happy? Was he at home with his buddies? Yep. Then he was happy. And that's what tonight's webinar is really about, is making sure that you guys understand that it ain't about the horse at that point. We have to do what the horse cannot do for himself. So the other problem is, who is the person that usually does this for you? Most of the time, it's your veterinarian. And in the case of, for example, Torque, this is my horse Torque, and he's still alive. But Dr. Jennifer Proctor has been my veterinarian since I moved to Georgia in 2011. So for 14 years, she has been his vet. And most of the work that she does with him, except for this thing, you got to have a halter on. But most of it she does at Liberty, and he knows her. She knows him. She's taken pictures of him for me. She's done all kinds of things with him. She loves that horse too. And so when you call your vet to come euthanize your horse and it's down on the ground and beating its head and it's dying of colic and all those things, it's an emotional thing for veterinarians too. And why do I say that's important? Because we know that veterinarians are killing themselves 4 times the rate of our normal population. So it's about them too. There's lots of reasons why, and I am not the expert on this. I talked to Dr. Amy Grice and I listened to many of the different things I see at AAP, but a lot of it comes down to financial stress. Some of it's psychological characteristics. The kinds of people that love to be a veterinarian also are very empathetic, which makes them open to having bad situations. But a lot of it comes down to the online bullying. About that vet that, just killed himself out west because he kicked the horse in the face, and he did, but just the internet went crazy and he ended up killing himself. So, we cannot keep doing this. I know you see it where you live. I see it in Georgia. We don't have enough veterinarians, period, much less equine veterinarians. And we're losing them and we're wearing them out, and we can't keep doing that. And then, of course, the things that really get to people, where you get horror stories, you get the calls and you go out and the owner has known it was colicking for a day. You finally get there and it's, black gums and the whole thing. And then the owner's like, oh, that was so nice of you. I'm glad he didn't suffer. And you're sitting there thinking, well, how do you not know what pain and suffering is? It's just shocking. So we're in charge of that last chapter. We need to get more organized about it. So the found dead, unexpected loss, that's actually the easiest one. It doesn't happen very often. Every once in a while, a horse drops dead of a heart event or whatever, but it's not as common as people think, because these are athletes. Even if they're an old horse, they're still an athlete. They're still better than us, and they're built for it. So, but if you find it dead, what do we got to worry about? We got to worry about some other things. It's not just the animal's dead. Now what? Where does the carcass go? Have we thought about insurance if the animal's insured, especially if it's a younger horse or it's in work? Have we notified the people that care about the horse? The lady that rides it, if it's just say it's a horse that a lot of people take lessons on. The lady that's been riding that horse for the last 10 years and taking a lesson twice a week, is she going to care? She's going to care. She wants to grieve that loss too, right? And maybe notify the people that care. Allowing yourself to grieve the loss, and of course, allow the other horses to grieve the loss if you have a situation where the horses can get together. And this is just an excellent example. This is a friend of mine that I've had for many, many years. He just called me the other day, and he was gracious enough to send these pictures to me. This is his daughter, and they found Sparky, who's 30, dead the other night. And no struggle, sign of struggle. She was perfectly fine the night before, thank goodness. And they dug the hole, they put the horse in, and she went and picked some flowers, and they're doing all the right things, right? That's allowing, the horse is dead. At that point, it's not about the horse anymore. It's about the people. It's about us and understanding our attachment to our animals, doing all the things, right? We got to process it, whatever's right for you. And every culture has their own things about death, right? So you figure out what's right for you. But the other culture that's important is the horse's culture. They have to have the time to process the loss too. Give them the time to make that connection and understand what's going on. Now, there's been no research that shows that all horses react in the same way. Some horses walk by the carcass of their friend and they just keep moving. Some horses panic and run through fences. Some horses go over and commune with the loss. This is a horse that came to my farm. My horses actually didn't know this horse, but Rudy came over. And what's interesting is he went straight to the nose. If you watch the video, he goes straight to the nose. He knows that a horse, even though we've covered the eyes, he knows it's a horse, and he's checking out the horse. So we got to give them time to process the loss too. So now let's go to the second one. The second one is the most common. It's an emergency. You come home, the animal's been injured. He's in the fence. He got hit by a car. He's very painful. He's suffering, all those things. And we got to have a plan we have to have a good connection with our veterinarian so that we can get our veterinarian there for emergencies. It's very important that you be able to reach out to your veterinarian. And if you haven't used your veterinarian for normal care in the last year, when you call your equine veterinarian these days, I don't blame them. They're going to say, who are you and why should I care? And I know that sounds awful, but if you don't have a working relationship with a veterinarian, why are they going to come out at 3:00 in the morning on a Saturday night if they don't even know who you are? Because you get all your other things done by someone else, or you go to Tractor Supply. Just saying. Okay. And then, of course, long-term treatment options that we may have to think about once, are there surgical options, pain and management? And then, of course, do we consider immediate euthanasia, or what are the time points that we say, hey, this happens, then we're going to consider immediate euthanasia. Many of us have been in this situation, and it's tough because now you're evaluating my finances, my time, when do I have to do the various things, all the other things that are going on in our busy lives, and we've got to make some tough decisions.
Can you just go back there for a second so I can, I think one of the things about this is planning. And I know we're talking about planning, but this is where just having a savings account for emergency care for your horse that you just set aside for peace of mind, because when this happens, you're going to make that snap decision whether or not to go to surgery. And if you choose surgery, you're looking at $10,000, $20,000 by the time that horse comes out of the surgery, hopefully alive and fine.
Yep.
Because you still have the bill whether he dies or not.
Yep.
So thinking about a health savings account for your horse is something that I think people don't consider, but should, given the cost, and the problem nowadays is once that horse goes into that vet clinic, you lose some control over what happens.
Yep. And the other thing that they really need to do is for years we've been saying, you should make a decision every year on how much you're willing to spend on your horses. And when you go out of town, those kind of things, I travel a lot. So I have to do this because I have to make rational decisions when I can be rational about it. Under this situation, you're not going to be rational. How much am I willing to spend on my 22-year-old horse that I can't ride anymore? How much am I willing to spend on my 5-year-old horse that's just coming into work?
I think you should change willing to can afford.
Right.
There's a difference.
That's right.
I'm willing to spend $100,000. I can afford 10.
Absolutely. So you have to do that for all your horses every single year. And the thing is, you have to let other people, you should have powers of attorney and all the legal things so that when you're on the plane or in Namibia or wherever you may be, where are you going? Botswana?
I'm going to Kenya.
Kenya. So when you're in Kenya and somebody can't reach out and touch you and something goes wrong, other people can make rational decisions for you. So,
and you don't have to be going that far. So, when my horse Andy died of botulism, he got sick while I was on a plane.
Yeah.
And, I did not get home in time. So I had a fantastic team that they all worked on that whole process, but they had authority to make the right decision, which they did.
And the authority is the most important thing, to be able to make that, and that they're willing to do so. So, in that, all the crazy things that can happen, the pasture incidents, in this case, he ran into wire, all those kinds of things that can go wrong. There's the same horse. They obviously got that fixed. They did all the treatments. They did all the thing. But I ask people, the finances problem, the time problem, the effort required, and is it going to go to expected use? If that's a brood mare, maybe it's not such a big deal. If that's a performance horse that does dressage, that's going to be a huge issue on whether or not that horse returns to expected use. So, those kinds of decisions have to be made, hopefully with your veterinarian, but, in a more rational manner. So, just so everybody's on the same sheet of music, I'm not a veterinarian. I'm a Ph.D. I always remind people of that, but I always go to the American Association of Equine Practitioners resources when it comes to these kind of things. And they say to other veterinarians that if you're looking at a horse that has these things, poor to grave prognosis, extremely serious injuries after you've done your triage, severe extent of injuries, multiple organ system, amputations, eviscerations, all those things, unresponsive to chronic pain management and treatment. So that could be your Laminitis horse that just ain't coming around, and despite all the things that you've done, and he's depressed, and we're weeks and months into this and still not having any good things. So, and then of course the situations like this, aggressive to responders and neurologic and all those kind of things. Those are the things that vets tell other vets you should consider immediate euthanasia. So we try to learn from what they say. And when we think about writing that lab chapter, we also have to think about, when we talk about that decreasing ability to cope, working with our veterinarian and saying, hey, what are our long-term options? How much am I looking at? Am I looking at 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? Are we looking at a painful horse that has to have pills every single day, and then maybe something's going to go on with his gut, and then that's going to long-term lead to laminitis, or it's going to lead to other things? How long are we talking about doing this? Are we talking about a situation where it's a younger horse, but he's got some genetic thing? My husband has a walking horse that he absolutely loves, but he has some of the tendencies already at 18 towards the DSLD. So he's a walking horse. He's already got the genetic tendencies towards it. He's already starting to drop a little bit in those back tendons. We're working with the farrier and the vet thing. But if he starts, at this point, he's not painful. But if he starts showing pain, how long are we willing to go on that, right? It's my husband's only horse. He chose that horse. I certainly don't want to go into elective euthanasia early. But we also don't want to cross the line into cruelty.
Well, and one of the things about considering the long term and pain management, we as humans can rationalize, okay, I'm going to have this surgery and the doctor tells me it's going to take me 6 months and it's going to be painful and I'm going to. How do you explain to a horse that you're going to be in pain for 6 months in order to be better?
Or do all the other crazy things that people do? I mean, you're exactly right. I see depressed horses after these kinds of things. I get PMs from people that work at vet clinics, and they are vet techs or even veterinarians, and they send me things and they say, hey, can you give me your honest assessment on what's going on here? Because I'm not okay with what we're doing with this horse. And the reason we're not doing it, we're not euthanizing the horse, is because the owner doesn't understand all the things and hasn't made the tough decision.
Or the insurance company.
Yeah, or the insurance company.
Been there, seen that.
It's awful. So and some of it comes down to human emotional distress. This is a horse that was in my community, and I drove by about once every week or so to check on this horse, see how it was doing. It was under veterinary care, and the owner was trying to do all the things, but it was starting to spend a lot of time laying down. And that's a big old fat quarter horse on little teeny tiny feet, obviously had navicular or laminitis or whatever it had. And so I started making some phone calls to animal control and to their veterinarian and saying, hey, it's not appropriate to let this thing just be laying out in the pasture for hours on end. There's something going on. We got to do something, whether it's pain management or whatever we're going to do. And finally, they made a tough decision and did the right thing for the horse. But I want you guys to understand, if you get nothing else out of this thing, the emotional distress is for you. It is all about the humans. And the more I've learned about this, the more I have learned that it's really about the psychology of it. And when I start talking to people about, putting their horse down, these are the questions that I get. And people say, when is it time to let them go? How do I know? And I'm sitting there thinking, he's telling you right now, right? But that's not always true. And some people don't understand how to look at those signs. And then I have had I'm afraid if I put my horse down, my friends are going to judge me. I'm at this barn and all these other girls are not going to understand. They're going to tell me that I'm a killer. Social media can be really tough, all those things. All these questions I have heard from people to me personally, what is pain in horses? How do I know if it's painful? And, there's a lot of information out there, but it's not sometimes getting into the hands of the horse people that might need it. Have I failed my horse in some way? That really is the question that many people ask themselves. And of course, all of us that have had to put a horse down for something, we all look back and go, what could we have done different? I mean, could we have fed him something, given him a supplement, done something different that would have made it, better? And when I started really looking into it, grief counselors call this anticipatory grief. And that makes a lot of sense, because if you have your horse and he's 10 right now, he's going to die in the next 20 years. That's just the statistics say he's going to die in the next 20 years. And so people spend the next 20 years worrying about their horse dying. And so that anticipatory grief over time, you were talking about habits. There you go. There's your habit. You're wondering every day you go out to the barn and is he okay? Is he alive? And if he doesn't show up to eat, then there's something wrong, right? But that's the thing. We as humans worry about those kinds of things, and it over time can really be a thing. So I'm not the grief counselor to help you with that, but I will tell you that grief counselors can help you with those kinds of things. So what happens is people fail to make the decision. They question themselves. They go through all the anticipatory grief. They do all those things. And meanwhile, the horse is out there 24/7 in the situation, whatever the situation is. And this is another horse that was in my area. And you can tell he's got crippling laminitis. And he finally was close enough to the road that I could get a video. So at this point, I'm
Highway 18 in Gray, Georgia.
I'm on the phone to animal control because we've gone way past. This is a long-term thing. The horse is in a lot of pain. He can't get to water because the water's 150 yards away. He can't get to food, and he's just laying down a lot. So, that's when I pick up the phone. That's when we get animal control out there, and then people get pissed because they're like, oh, well, why is animal control coming looking at me? I love my horse. And they go, well, you may love your horse, but you're failing to make this decision. And that's tough, right? And that means that you're now in defensive mode and all those things. So try to make a plan so you don't end up in those kinds of situations. And now let's talk about the emotional distress for horses. When we sell them or we pass them off to somebody else or we leave them to our friends or we're not willing to make that decision, or even if we do make the decision, we load them on the trailer and take them to the vets to have them euthanized. What's going through their mind? Are they thinking, oh my God, they're going to pull out a gun and kill me, or they're going to pull out a needle and kill me? No, they're not worried about that. That's not how they think. What they're worried about is, where's my routine? Where's my friends? Why did you take me away from all the things that I knew? Who's this new human? Why am I hurting so much? Pain makes you really depressed. So, I'm depressed, I'm hurting, my friends aren't around, all those things. That's an awful negative valence for a horse. They're not worried about the actual correct euthanasia. They don't understand what you're doing.
Right. And you have these obviously in a form that humans can understand, but you can simplify it being, like isolated right? Or my herd is gone, or I'm hungry, or, I don't
being
understand
chased.
Right.
It's an
being
older
chased.
horse. You dump them into a new situation. They're being chased,
Right.
That's no fun.
And so I just want to point that out, that while this makes it, these are easy questions for humans to understand, horses, just simplify it down to a 5-year-old. Where's my friend? I'm hungry. I hurt.
Exactly.
I'm
very stressful.
Right.
So, and then of course there's all the things that are outliers, right? This is an outlier for you. This is a good story. This is not a bad story. I know it looks from the picture that's a bad story. This is my father, and this is Georgie, poor G. He's 30 years old. My dad's 88. This is a bottle-fed orphan that I got in 95. I trained him for about 5 years. I used him in large animal rescue. He's 1,400 pounds. My dad's been riding him ever since, and my dad still rides every once in a while. He had a tooth extracted because he's 30, and the on the bottom of his chin, he ended up having a drainage because of the tooth extraction. And so the vet said, hey, you got to clean it on the outside 3 times a day. You got to give him these pills, all these kind of things. My parents call me, tell me this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my 88-year-old parents, how the hell are they going to do this on a 1,400 years, all the things. So I just had to show you that it's not always what you think. That's his horse laying out there sleeping. And my dad goes, that's okay. I'm just going to go out there and clean his little wound right now. I was like, okay, obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? Now, I know he looks like he's dying right there. So I put the video later on that day of the same horse. But what I'm saying is, what we assume is the problem and what we get emotionally distressed about is not always what we need to get emotionally distressed about, right? So there you go. My dad, that wound healed perfectly fine. My dad took it very seriously. He did all the things that he needed to do. And I was obviously worried for no reason, right? So there you go. So now let's talk a little bit about over time. We're starting to get into the increasing pain and mobility issues. At that point, we cannot just dump our old horse out. We cannot have our horse that has laminitis, et cetera, dumped out in the pasture. We have to get veterinarian advice. We have to consider what we're going to do, short-term, long-term, pain management, all those kind of things. And, at that point, we may consider elective euthanasia, or we say, hey, this is the constraints that we have to do that, because these are some of the ones where we really start getting into the cruelty situations where people, they love their horse enough, but they dump them out in the pasture and they're not looking at them in anything, or they go the other way. And this is the other way. And I'm not saying any of these are wrong. These are various pictures where horses had bilateral problems with their feet. And so in this case, the horses are being supported in a sling. We use these a lot in large animal rescue. There's nothing wrong with using a sling. The question becomes, how often is the horse in the sling? Are you putting him in the sling, once every 6 weeks or every 3 weeks to get him trimmed because he hurts? Is he spending every day in the sling? Is he going to spend the next 6 months in the sling? All those kind of things. That has to be evaluated with a veterinarian. You can't just go buy a sling, put your horse in it, and do all the things that you're going to do to him. You can keep him alive in a sling for a long time, but should we? And that's really the question that we have to ask. And believe me, I've run into some of those kinds of things over the years as the technology has improved, where people have tried to keep things alive that probably should have made a hard decision for a long time ago. And at this point, when we were talking about adulting, Wendy, one of the other big things is the caregiver burden. And we have to say to ourselves, what is our time budget? How much time can we spend caring for the horse? I know several people right now that are within my circle who have horses that have severe problems, tendon injuries, things like that. And they are spending 2, 4, 6, 8 hours a day on that horse doing the things. They're doing the red lights. They're doing the treatments and the hosings and the things and the things and the things. And what I see is all of a sudden they're not interacting with everybody else normally. And now that this is going on for 6 months, and then it starts getting into a year, now it's 2 years, and all of a sudden their personal relationships, because everybody learns really quick, oh, well, we can't see so-and-so because they're dealing with their horse. And so they off to do their thing. The family is like, oh my God, it's that horse again. Oh my God, all the things, right? So at what point does the burden of our personal health and well-being have to be taken into thing? And then, of course, if you're physically unable to take care of the horse, which is what I was worried about with my dad, at what point can you not physically take care of a 1,400-pound horse anymore? So we have to ask ourselves that. And Spitznagel and others have been asking those kinds of questions too, because it affects us. These are some more examples. When do we say no more? It's very distressed horses in very skinny neglect situations. And in large animal rescue, we sometimes get pulled into these cruelty situations. And sometimes you hit great stories and the horse recovers beautifully when done with a veterinarian and all those things. But there's some of these situations where it becomes obvious that you're not going to win and we have to make hard decisions. So,
there's they've looked at humans where you have someone who's ill and they're in the hospital and they're doing everything for the person to survive, and it compromises the entire family, and then the person dies anyway, and nobody grieved the loss because they all thought the person was going to make it. And I actually ran into somebody who had that very experience, and how it basically is so destructive to the people that have been trying to save the person, right? Yep. I mean, the financial loss, the emotional loss, the lack of grieving, because they're in survivor mode, right? Yep. And I think with horses, you wind up with the same thing, that everybody thinks, or whoever it is thinks, I can save this horse. And then when the horse does die, how devastated it's like everything else around that person has been destroyed in the process.
And sometimes their financial stability too.
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen it. It's awful. So the last thing of this situation is what happens when something happens to you. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I have seen it enough times over my life. And when I work with law enforcement on some of these horrific situations where, you have typically it's an older lady, and they were breeding horses, and then they didn't stop breeding in time. And now they've got 30 horses, 60 horses, 80 horses. It's in the news all the time. It's on social media all the time. And at what point, when people call me and they say, well, my husband died and left me 30 horses. And I'm like, ma'am, you sound like you're older. How old are you? Oh, I'm 75. Okay. And what are you going to do with these horses? Oh, my husband said that they were worth a lot of money. And I'm like, okay, how old are the horses? And then you start asking the questions. When was the last time they saw a vet? When was the last time they saw a farrier? And you know how that goes, right? Yeah. They haven't seen any of that stuff in years. They don't have the registration papers anymore. The horses, value-wise, are zero. And now we're trying to figure out how to make it best for the horses too. And that's really tough. So 30% of people in the United States right now have an actual will. So anybody that's on this, please go get yourself a will. I was talking to Wendy about it. You need to update your trust. Trust, will, financials, your insurance, your legals. Folks, I just had my first ex-husband die. I'm the executor for his account, and he did everything right. And it's still taken me 3 months of getting through all the paperwork and the hoops. Not that I'm offended. I want to do those kinds of things for him, but it's still taking on something, right? So I tell people
3 months is fast.
That's right. And I tell people,
2 years.
You're 60 years old and you're still breeding horses. You're 70 years old and you're still taking in a young horse. And I go, have you done the math? I mean, my dad's 88 and he's still got a horse, right? But he's only riding it once or twice a week. He goes out and checks the cows. The horse is an old horse. He knows the routine. I'm not sure how much my dad actually has to do. The horse is pretty smart. He does all the things, right? But how many people do you actually know? I'm not trying to offend anybody, and I have an 83-year-old in the room. How many people at 83 are actually riding horses regularly and taking care of lots of horses? Not many. So we have to do the math in our head. We have to come up with a plan. And we all know that the horrific things can happen to us. We can get sick. All those things. So just do it. And the thing is, after John died, I went and got my will updated again. Trust, wills, power of attorney, all those things. And it is really a huge weight off of your brain because you have done the work to say, hey, I did it. I took it off my head. I don't have to worry about that anymore, right? It's one less thing to have to worry about. Because this is not the way you want to find out that you've been given a horse. This is a girlfriend of mine, and her husband sent me this back in February and said, hey, my wife is in hospice and wants you to have her horse. She died about 2 weeks later, and I did call him, and I did go out to Oklahoma City and see the horse and commune with him and say, I'm very, very sorry. But there was no way. This horse is 25 years old. He's a Morgan. He has a great situation where he's living right now. And the man that has him is going to allow them to live at his place until they're gone. And I was like, that's so much better for him than dragging him to Georgia, no matter how much I like my girlfriend, right? Just awful. Don't let that be. A text is not the way to find out that somebody left you a horse, right? Mm-hmm. That's just an example. And for those of you that believe in rainbow kisses and unicorn farts, if you know me, you know that I don't believe in that crap because it's just not that common, right? It is. I've heard it my whole life, and I actually did it. My first old horse, I went off to college, and I gave him to a child that, quote, wanted my old horse, and I didn't know any better. I believed the lies. When I came home 6 months later, he had already dropped about 150 pounds, all the things, and I got away with it. I went to their farm, took my horse, walked him home, and he lived another 3 years with us. But I didn't know that other people don't know how to take care of a horse, and they aren't going to put the things into it. So this is where your horse will end up, I promise you, if you don't do all the right things. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody that's on here, but that's where they end up because they're a beloved old horse. They end up in that cycle. And if they don't have skills, if they don't have value of any kind, this is where they end up. And it's not even the slaughter that I care about. It's the transportation and going through the kill pens and doing all those kind of things, right? It's
that's a whole nother story. Yeah.
It's a whole nother story. I'm not the expert on that either. So now let's get down to the planning considerations. What are we going to actually do? We got to sit down with a lawyer. If we own a horse, a race horse, we own multiple people have investment in the horse. It's a valuable horse. It's an insured horse, all those things. We got to look at all that first, right? And then we got to think about, hey, I keep my horse on my friend's property. If the horse dies, can I bury him there? And that used to be easy. It ain't easy these days. On my own property, I don't allow it. I have a compost pile, and I occasionally let friends bring their horse to my compost pile, but they're not allowed to bring it with any of the pentobarbital in it. It has to either been shot or found dead or lidocaine euthanasia. We don't want the forever chemicals in my water supply. I have a well and all those things. Are you going to cremate it? That may cost you a couple $1,000s. Is somebody going to say, hey, I'm sorry, but you can't bury it here. You're going to have to go do something else with it. What do you do with it, right? Where can you take it? Some communities, the only option is to take it to a landfill. And for some people, that's horrible. So whatever it is for you, coordinate with your shooter, coordinate with your veterinarian. If you're making an elective decision, make sure that they show up at the correct time. Have you let other people say goodbye? If it's an elective decision that doesn't have to be done today or this hour or this minute, then can other people say goodbye? That can be really complicated because people will put a lot of pressure on you. Why are you putting him down? Oh my God, he looks perfectly healthy. All the things, right? In my case, most of the time when I make these decisions, I euthanize the horse and then I let the friends know. After the horse is gone, they can come say goodbye, those kind of things. So whatever, it just makes it simpler, right? And then mementos, you got to think ahead about those kind of things. Do you want photos? Do you want tail hairs? Do you want the priest to come by? I was on the scene with a veterinarian that I was actually dating a long time ago. And it's a really funny story. I'll tell you over a beer sometime. But what it really came down to was they actually had the priest come by. And actually it was really cool. We all sat around and had a little circle and he did a prayer and talked about the horse. And it was really cool. That was their thing. And we got dragged into it, but it was actually pretty cool. So whatever your thing is, but you gotta have it coordinated ahead of time, right? And that means, where am I going to put it? Is it going to be picked up by a crematory like Epona, those kind of folks that come pick up the horse, put it on a rescue glide, move it to the landfill or the crematory or wherever they're going to do? That's what it's going to look like, right? Are you going to compost it? Do you have a way to compost it on your own property? Do you have a hole? If you're going to dig a hole, it's got to be a hole. It can't be some 3-foot thing. I'm not even going to tell you about the number of times that we've had to go do a large animal rescue of a horse out of a grave site because it filled with water and now the other horses fall into it. It's believe me, it's awful. And it happens pretty regularly. So bury it, you're going to bury it deep enough, which means you can't do that with a farm tractor. You need the heavy equipment to be able to dig it at least 8 feet deep. 8 feet is a long way. So got to coordinate for all that stuff ahead of time. And this ain't cheap either, right? You're going to drop a couple $100 in most communities to be able to get somebody out there with a backhoe. And you need to plan ahead because you might not be able to get them at the drop of a hat. So, and all the things to remember your horse. Coordinate ahead of time. Well, how are you going to do this kind of thing? This is a girlfriend of mine. She had her horse cremated, and then she got all the little jewelry with his cremains in them. There's another girlfriend of mine buried her horse, and this is a circle of rocks that she put around his grave. Whatever works for you. Take the photos. Get the cremains put into jewelry. This is one of my horses, my horse that I was very attached to. And I always said that I was never going to put his horse hide in a hole and let it rot. I was going to use it for education. So after he was euthanized, I had him skinned. So everybody has their thing, right? And other people look at me and they're like, what? And I go, well, otherwise I wouldn't have this huge skin to be able to educate people with. And I use it all the time. So whatever your thing is, right? So now let's get down to the very last day. And we've made our plan. We've got the vet coming. Or whoever we're going to do these things. We've got the hole dug, those kind of things. And what I tell people is think ahead. Think about it. This Chocolate Smiles program that they have for dogs these days. And a lot of people are doing the in-home euthanasia for their dogs and cats. And that's wonderful because the animal's in their normal environment. It's a lot less stressful, all those things. You may consider that for your horse too. Loading them up, taking them to the vet may be a little bit more stressful. So, can you just put them out on fresh grass? The vet's going to be there in 4 hours. This poor horse hasn't been on fresh grass because he's,
laminitic
and metabolic and all the things. Give him all the dang treats he wants. Give him all the sweet feed he wants. Do all the things, right? And I have a good example, right? This is Luke. This is my girlfriend's horse. We were going to euthanize him the next day. I said, bring him over to my house. Let's just let him eat all the grass he wants, and then we'll put him in the compost pile after the vet comes. And so there's Luke. He had this horrific cancer on his back leg, and we just let him run around, eat all the grass he wanted. I gave him a big bucket of grain before the veterinarian got there, and very good day. I made dinner. We had a glass of wine. We sat out there for a couple hours and watched him just enjoy the grass and do all the things, right? Make it a good day. And she always has a wonderful memory about that. And I met the vet. She didn't even have to come out and meet the vet if she didn't want to, right? So make it a good day. And I'm not just telling you guys for, y'all should do this and not that. This is what I say, and this is what I do. This is Tornado. This is my horse, Tornado. And this is his herd. And this is Onyx and Torque and Porsche. And this is Tornado. And this is my veterinarian. And she has known Tornado for 14 years. And she came out. I said, Doc, do you got enough lidocaine today when you come? Are you going to bring enough lidocaine? She said, who's going down? And I said, I think Tornado is at the October decision. And so she came out and we did all the shots and stuff for everybody else. And then we went out in the pasture and we gave him some grain and did all the things. And then we laid him down, anesthetized him, and did the lidocaine method of euthanasia, which I'm going to educate you guys about here in a second because I think it's really important. And the reason it's important is because it's a new method of euthanasia that AAP considers to be humane. And veterinarians love it, and you're going to love it because Tornado was born in 1999, and he came out of his mama, and I was there, and his little feet and his little head came into my hands, and I was right there. And when he left, I had his head right in my hands. I was right there with him. And that's a beautiful thing, guys. It's his last day, and I have wonderful memories about it. I know I'm crying because, of course, if I wasn't, I wouldn't be human, right? But the point is, I was right there with him, and I was able to give my herd time with him too. They've known him for many years. Give them time. This is other girlfriend of mine's that have been doing the same thing. Give the horse time to just hang out with his buddy, figure it out, process in whatever way that horses process, and make peace on their own. Right?
And they do. They absolutely do.
They do. This is my friend this week. This is one of his other horses. The other horse actually left. He was like, that horse is dead. Oh, well, and left. This horse is not okay. And he wanted to go explore the hole and all those things. And I always tell people, make a nice ramp. So the horses, if they go in to see their friend, they can leave, right? Make a nice ramp. So he did. So they got to have the time to process. Give them the time to. So the last part is just about this new method of euthanasia that the veterinarians have been using. So many horse people have so many questions about what is humane, what is euthanasia. We want to cause as little pain and distress as possible. So the new method is using lidocaine in the portion of the spinal cord that's at this end. It's the exact same procedure that they use in pregnant women when you're birthing at the other end of your spine. I forget the name of it. Anyway, it's
epidural.
Yes, epidural. It's the exact same thing, but it's at the other end versus this end. And so this is the method. It's an animal has to be anesthetized, and then they're going to use lidocaine, which is the same thing that you inject into your mouth when you get dental work or whatever. It's in that same class of things. It's not the euthanasia solution that we've used for many years. This is a forever chemical. The veterinary world is trying to get away from that. The barbiturates are going to be, they're showing up in our drinking water, folks. We got to get better. Wow. And then, of course, gunshot wound to the head is a very common way under emergency situations that is considered humane and very acceptable. We're not going to talk about those kind of things. We're just going to talk about the lidocaine injection so that you guys can see it. This is the old way, this is the best euthanasia you guys are ever going to see. This is an older 30-year-old horse, and this veterinarian and the owner were gracious enough to let us video this. And this is the best euthanasia ever. The horse is pre-sedated in this case. The veterinarian puts the catheter into the vein, and then she's going to use the pink juice, the euthanasia solution, to knock the horse down. What happens is the drug goes to the brain, causes the brain to go to sleep, and then the big shot of the salt, the potassium salt, goes to the heart and stops the heart. This is a beautiful example of euthanasia. It doesn't always go this well. And the problem with this chemical is it's a forever chemical. It's like DDT, PCBs, all those kind of things. So we're trying to get away from that, particularly the huge amount of it that we use in a horse for euthanasia. Good. Does a nice job. Watch the vet. The vet knows how dangerous this can be. She pushes the horse back. This horse just goes down beautifully. What a nice job. The horse, his brain is dead at this point. And she's going to check for all the things. Make sure that there's no reflexes, the heart stops, the lungs stop, all those things, right? So very similar to that is anesthesia. Some of you have had your horses gelded, or you've had a procedure done where the veterinarian laid the horse down on the ground, and that's what's going to happen here. This is a horse that's being laid down before euthanasia. Again, the dangerous part is when you have a 1,000-pound animal standing there, and Dr. Davenport is working to get the animal down in a safe manner. Notice she's wearing a helmet because we all know how dangerous this can be. The hard part is getting the anesthetized horse to the ground. And beautiful. Nice job. Very nice job. So once the animal's anesthetized, I want you guys to understand the difference between anesthetized and dead. This is an anesthetized horse. He can still wink and blink. He still has a corneal and a palpebral reflex right there in the corner of the eye, anesthetized only. At this point, the animal is not aware of what's going on. He can't make decisions, but he's not dead. And that's where we will, in this case, this was the ears are here. This is right behind the pole. And the veterinarian is going to inject this, take this big catheter and push it into
He's going to pull off about 20 or 30 cc's of cerebral
into the spinal cord and pulls off the fluid that's in the cerebrospinal fluid, and then they're going to inject the lidocaine.
It's going to fill that entire interthecal space with lidocaine, and it literally blocks the ability of those neurons to pass information. So notice his breathing over here.
Stop breathing.
It's amazing. So the difference between this and the pentobarbital euthanasia that we've been using for all those years is it can take a lot longer for the heart and lungs to stop. His lungs stop pretty quick, but that doesn't always happen. It can take several minutes. But the beautiful thing is he's anesthetized. He's not aware of anything that's going on. And you can be right here versus the other types of euthanasia where you can't be anywhere close to your horse. You can be right there holding his head in your hands while the veterinarian's doing their part. So I encourage you guys to talk to your veterinarians about it. And then, of course, you have to confirm death, right? You have to make sure that there's no heartbeat, there's no respiration, those reflexes of the eye are gone, and then the animal moves into rigor mortis. But, the reason I showed these videos is I want you guys to understand it doesn't have to be as emotional as we think it has to be. It can be a beautiful thing if you plan it well, if you do all those things, and you get to the dry eye and dilated pupil. This is what we want to see. The fixed dilated pupil in a horse looks very different from our round eye, our round pupil. It's an oval pupil. No wink, no blink. The eye is dry. The animal is dead at this point, right? That's where we want to get. So we just want to make you guys much more aware of what death is and how we get there, because it can be very challenging, right? And I have to go back to Dr. McGreevy over in Australia, and he said this quite a few years ago, and I love this. The unquestionable value of planning end-of-life decisions for your animals lies chiefly in its ability to avoid the extended suffering. A comfortable death is the last kindness you can offer them, and by the same token, forward planning to your horse's end of life is a kindness to yourself. And I cannot tell you how much kinder it is to yourself. You take all that anticipatory grief and you stuff it into, I've done the plan. I have a plan. Doesn't mean everything's going to follow the plan every single time, but man, is it so much better for everybody. So at that point, I'll entertain questions. I really appreciate Wendy having me on for yet another webinar. And I hope that you guys get something out of this. Questions?
I'm just going to see if I can't unpin you. Oh, wait, when's it? I've lost. There we go. Unpinned. I don't know that there are any questions. Let me just check. No, I think you've been pretty thorough here and talking about a lot, and I just want to say I've been through a couple of different options, like traumatic options. And I've been so fortunate because I've had really good support people and sometimes unexpected support when, things have happened. But the advanced grieving, I find what's the term for it?
Anticipatory grief.
So I just want to kind of share one little story about that. My cat has 4 different heart problems and he's on medication and has been for a couple of years now, and he gets pills 3 times a day, and he opens his mouth and you pop them in, and he's super good about it. And he knows he can't go to bed until he gets his night pill. And then he gets his greenies. But the other day he had puked up a fur ball, and then suddenly his purring was congested. Yeah. And he didn't eat breakfast and it was really awful. And so I gave him a second dose of his furosemide with his pemivendin. I know this, right? And then I actually gave him a homeopathic remedy, and by the afternoon he had turned around. But that moment of, the distress was so great, and hearing the sound of his purring, and it was totally anticipatory grieving. I mean, I was totally like, and then today he lives to live another day, and he bounces out the door like normal, like, I'm fine, Mom, there's nothing wrong with me. And you're like, oh my God, you were like, we joke all the time when he flaps on the floor that he's dead, or nearly dead. But it's real. It's real, and you have to acknowledge it. And, you know, it's, there are days when I know every day I'm lucky that he's still with me, because he is definitely my cat. But I think we sometimes want to like not feel that grieving. And I think it's such an important part of our human process.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I think a lot of the not wanting to address this is that when you go through the process of planning, you're also going through anticipatory grieving. You're going through that process of someday he's not going to be there.
Yep.
And I think that when we recognize,
and then we feel guilty for it.
Yeah, but if we recognize anticipatory grieving is important, because it just helps us be human and feel the emotions that are real, as opposed to avoiding them, bottling them up, faking them, not having, you know, like, no, I can't face that. I just think it's just important. We have to, you know, be with those emotions and feel them, and it's part of life.
The worst situation that I've ever had was I got a call from a lady that wanted to buy a sling. And at the time we had a sling that we weren't using in large animal rescue. And so I was like, okay, well, started asking some more questions. And she says, well, I have this horse and it's laminated on all 4 legs. And I was like, what are you using the sling for? And she said, well, I'm going to sling it in the trailer and take it out to Wyoming. And I'm going to have, there's a vet out there that does all this work on prosthetics. And we're going to put prosthetics on all 4 legs. And I said, my sling is not for sale to you. And then I got a hold of animal control. And then fast forward about 2 years later, and Dick Mansman, I was at his house having dinner and up in North Carolina. And he starts telling this story about this crazy lady that had a horse that was laminated. I said, was its name Rapture? Because that's her horse's name, was Rapture. He said, yeah, how'd you know? I said, because apparently a lot of us knew about Rapture. And so that horse, I don't know what the actual end to that horse was. She had moved it from barn to barn as people started raising cane and calling animal control and all those things. And her last comment to me on the phone when I said my sling is not for sale was, you veterinarians, which I wasn't a vet, but
yeah, exactly.
You veterinarians just want to kill everything. And I was like, maybe sometimes they need to be put down, right? So,
yeah. And but that brings up another, in my opinion, they don't see death the way we do.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope that you guys got something out of this. I hope that it will stimulate you guys to, or girls, to make some research into some of these things. You can always reach out to me. My contact information is on the end of the slide. And I hope you'll share this with other folks, because that's the only way we get better.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. I know it's a tough topic, and thank you for sharing your personal stories.
Of course. It makes it, actually, it's better for me. It's a good, I like talking about it, because that's the only way that I can get over these kinds of things too. And hopefully you guys can learn from my experiences. So many people have shared their stories with me over the years and made me smarter and changed my opinions about all these kinds of things. So there you go.
All right. Well, next time a happier topic, okay? I don't know. You never have happy topics. You always have serious
I know. Actually, I do have some happy topics. I'll get a hold of Alex and submit some happy topics.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Enjoy your trip in Africa.
Okay, I will. Bye.
Bye.